You want your capital to grow, don't you? And the challenge is, what do you do with like a health savings account that's got very little money in it? You guys met my daughter, Melissa, who's pregnant with my third grandchild. Woohoo! And so she's got a health savings account. She just opened at Quest. It's got $1,000 in it. How in the world do you invest $1,000 in real estate? Do houses cost more than $1,000 even in Detroit? Right? So what do? You just keep making your contributions year after year, and then 5 years from now you can go buy a house with Tommy for 30 grand? Maybe. People do, right, Tommy? Or is there something else creative that we can do? What else can we do? Or how about for my grandkids are set up with inherited IRAs. An inherited Roth IRA is a great gift to give. It's an incredible gift to give. It's like giving them a tax-free checkbook for the next 10 years now, okay? That's a nice gift to give. Isn't that a nice way, as an alternate way to doing an ESA, an educational savings account? The problem is a lot of these accounts, or the challenge is, they have small dollar balances. Does anybody in the room have a small dollar balance in their IRA? So what do? Well, you can go to Jackson, Mississippi and see Walter, and you're going to learn about 15 different ways to do this. But I'm going to give you one that I like to do, that I've done many times, and I've done it with some of the people in this room, which is joint ventures. You take the small dollar IRA, and that IRA goes and finds a house to buy. You find it for it, okay? You own the account. You can select the investment you want for the IRA. Does that make sense? So maybe I would go to like Jackson or Petersburg or somewhere where there's a cheap house, $40,000. Maybe I'll go visit Tommy. Wouldn't Tommy be fun to hang out with? Oh my gosh, I think he's a lot of fun and very funny. Maybe you go to Detroit and you say, Tommy, I need a joint venture house for my HSA. You can help find one, couldn't you? Where'd you go, Tommy?
Absolutely.
So you go see Tommy, or go to Petersburg and see Ray, or wherever. Or South Bend with Stephen, you have the same prices, right? Or John in Huntsville, they're all over. Decatur. And you say, all right, so I found this house. It's like I can be all in at 50 grand and rent it for 700 or whatever the numbers are. But the problem is my health savings account, my inherited Roth IRA, or my brand new open traditional IRA, whatever, my educational savings account for my grandkids or my own children doesn't have the $30,000 or $40,000. So you just leave it and just let the money accumulate with contributions. You can grow your accounts without even making contributions if you're a creative deal maker. So all you've got to do is, one thing you can do is find somebody else who's got a larger account IRA or money in their checking book from their business or whatever, it can be either, that doesn't really know how to invest. It may be they just transferred the money to Quest. It might be that they put it there and they don't really know how to invest their self-directed IRA, and they have capital just sitting there. Or maybe they've made a series of investments at a large IRA and they don't know how to invest that last $40,000 or $60,000 or $100,000 or $200,000. So it's just some capital sitting there. They've got the capital, but they don't have the deal flow. You need both. You got to have capital and you got to have deal flow to be a deal maker. So you can do what's called a joint venture. And the reason I really like joint ventures is it's equity financing. When you go to the bank, they give you an interest rate, they tell you how many points you're going to pay, and you start making monthly payments, right? With equity financing, there is no mortgage payment. Do you like the sounds of that? And there is no interest rate. It's not that you're not paying them dividends, it's that they're going to get it monthly based on the rental income. And so all of a sudden, unlike the stock market where the dividends are really small, you can create a monthly or quarterly dividend basically from a rental property by doing a joint venture. So one IRA that has money, one IRA that has the deal, a small one and a big one. The big one comes together in the joint venture, and together they buy the property. Actually, the small dollar IRA owns the property. It could be a health savings account, an IRA, or whatever. And I'll come back to that in a little more detail. I've covered some of that. So when I go around the country, I always say, what's holding you back? And a lot of people, a lot of real estate investors will say, well, forget the whole self-directed IRA thing. They just say banks are a pain to deal with. They don't understand as a real estate entrepreneur, as a landlord, with all this depreciation, I don't really show any income. I don't really pay any taxes. I don't have a W-2. So I can't get financing to do it. And the other thing I always hear is what I just covered. I've only got a small dollar IRA. I can't do anything but make contributions. So there are ways to do this. Like I said, who in this room would like to invest without an interest rate? Raise your hand. Without a mortgage payment, without an appraisal, without a credit report, without underwriting, without your loan officer, and without cash. I mean, who wouldn't, right? All this stuff is possible. So there's two people in a joint venture. The first is the real estate entrepreneur. Okay, this is the person that sources the deal, that goes to Detroit or Decatur, Alabama, or South Bend, Indiana, or Jackson, Mississippi, or Petersburg, Virginia. And you're going to source the deal. You're going to go out there and do the due diligence. You found a ranch house for 40 grand or whatever the number is. I'm going to give you an example of 100,000 in a minute. It doesn't have to be cheap, okay? You're going to source the deal. You guys are the deal makers that make this happen anyways. You're going to source the deal, and then you're going to manage the rehab, okay? Through a general contractor or whatever. And then you're going to probably, if it's in an IRA, you're going to hire a property manager. You guys know how to do that, right? There's one right outside the hall. Tommy's a property manager in Detroit. If you want to go to Detroit, man, turnkey right there. You could source the deal, Tommy, you could help it get fixed up, and you could rent it, couldn't you?
Absolutely.
Man, I'm glad I called on you. All right, so that's what you're going to do as a real estate entrepreneur. Now, the other piece is the higher dollar IRA, or the person with the money in their checking account, whatever it is. This is the person, all they've got to do is fund the deal. They got to do due diligence and fund the deal, two things. And I'm going to come back to due diligence in a little while because it's critical. And the real estate investor does due diligence on the property, okay? I'm going to assume that. Got to be a good deal. But you guys are deal makers. You can handle that. So the IRA is the equity funding partner, okay? Again, equity financing is what I like because it's not subject to UBIT, unrelated business income tax. Nick?
Yeah, so if it's a self-directed IRA, you're not legally allowed to work on it yourself, correct?
Correct. There are rules, and I want you to follow the rules. So you don't want to be, yeah, same thing, whether it's an HSA or whatever. You don't want to be swinging the hammer. As real estate investors, we shouldn't be doing that anyways. When Cheryl and I first started flipping houses in Richmond, I did a lot of the work myself, some of it. I was cutting grass, Cheryl was cleaning every house. My work wasn't good, so she fired me pretty quickly, but you know what I mean? That isn't the best use of our time anyways. So get somebody on your team to do all of that. And so the higher dollar IRA or business person with money in their checkbook or whatever doesn't have the skill set that you guys have. You guys in this room have a skill set that is in high demand. You can source deals direct from a motivated seller and buy houses at a discount. How many people in the room can do that? Okay? You guys have a very unique skill set that the majority of this country does not have. Most people, 99.9% of the people, go to a realtor, they pull up the MLS, and they pay full price for a house, right? You guys have a skill set that's unique. You know how to connect with a motivated seller, negotiate a discount point, add value, and create equity day one, okay? So that's a skill set that's in high demand. I want you to know. I want you to believe that in yourself. So you got a real estate investor or a self-directed IRA investor that will source the deal, manage the rehab, get it rented out, and manage the property, maybe through a property manager. I'm not going to give you every detail you need to work out. And then you've got an equity partner or a joint venture partner with money sitting in an IRA or money sitting in a checkbook. I've done both, okay? So it doesn't have to be one or the other, it can be both. And all they really do is they're 100% passive mailbox money. How many people like mailbox money? I mean, who wouldn't, right? And they receive your dividend check, which is a distribution from the cash flow, the net cash flow from your tenant that's in the house. I have some equity partners that want that check monthly. I have some that want it quarterly. I've had some never cash my checks for 6 months. Talk about passive, right? It's like we finally said, will you cash our checks? Or if you don't want them, we'll just do interest accruing or something different till the end. I mean, it isn't too much work to cash my checks. Here's a real life case study of one that I did in my health savings account. It's not a $40,000 house in Detroit, Decatur, Jackson. It is a $100,000 house roughly in the beautiful city of Richmond, Virginia, in a not so nice area near the VA hospital. Do you guys know where the VA hospital is? You Richmonders, do you agree? It's not like the best neighborhood. So we bought this a while ago, but I'm gonna go through the numbers, okay? Because I've sold it. So I've gone all the way through the joint venture, all the way to sale. This property was owned by my own health savings account, okay? I sourced it. We got the rehab done. Again, this is sort of how it works. I'm trying to improve my visuals so you guys really capture this. Health savings account, catalyst investor, that's me, okay? Small dollar starter account, that's what I had back when we started this, okay? How many of you guys in the room could say you could see yourselves being that piece of this, okay? Good. That was me. I had a new account at Quest several years ago, and I had very little money in it. But the cool thing is, even with a small dollar IRA, you can use the best form of real estate, which is leverage. Leverage is so critical. So if you leverage even a $1,000 account and you control a $100,000 property, you get the benefits of that property, right? It's pretty cool to do that in a tax-free account. And the Roth IRA, in this case, somebody else's Roth IRA, not at Quest, he was at Equity Trust, was the financier. So we did equity financing on this property. Purchased it for 70. I could not purchase this property for 70 today. This was several years ago in the downturn. You guys remember that? When everyone was afraid to buy. And we put about 22.5 in it. The total investment on my joint venture agreement with this IRA was $92,500 for the 4-bedroom, 2-bath house in a rough area of Richmond, Virginia. When we bought it, the ARV was around 125, 130. So the day we bought it, we had equity, right? And so how did my health savings account have enough money to put the renovation into that house before we rented it? Did you guys catch that? So at closing, $92,500 was sent from the larger Roth IRA to my title company, not to me, not to my HSA. It was sent to the title company, and the remainder above purchase price on that went to my health savings account. Okay? And I had it all up front. That's the way that we do it. And then we did the renovation, which was a reasonably extensive renovation back then. Okay? So that's what it was worth. Then we rented it Section 8. I'm not a huge fan of Section 8 in today's market. I told you my ideal resident and all that stuff. Back in the downturn, I did more Section 8 because I didn't want to have to worry about telling people rent's due. Every month, Section 8 dropped into the account for my property manager. I used the property manager on this because it was with my health savings account. My property manager did a good job managing it. I had 0 issues. Had rent every month the entire time. We had 0 vacancy, that's the truth, the whole time we had this joint venture. One nice thing about Section 8 I found is if you get a decent Section 8 tenant, now they did tear up the house a bit at the end, but we got our rent every month on time. Cheryl, hello. All right, you remember this house? I know you do. Taxes were $1,320 a year. Insurance was $650. So the taxes and insurance are the only expenses we have. How can that be? How can there be no mortgage payment? I told you guys, with joint ventures, there's not really a mortgage payment. 100% leveraged, no mortgage payment. So what we do is we take the 1245, we subtract out the 164 a month, net cash flow, roughly $1,000 a month, okay? You see how you're completely leveraged and how you also created a huge amount of cash flow in this property? Okay, I'll show you how this works out. Oops, go back one. So we roughly had $1,000 a month positive cash flow. It's easy to have positive cash flow when you don't have any mortgage, any debt financed mortgage, right? So you end up with $1,080. That works out to $540 a month for each of the two partners. So the small dollar IRA, in this case my health savings account, and also the large dollar IRA sitting at Equity Trust also received $540 a month. So I took in the entire amount of rent, I escrowed my own taxes and insurance, and then I sent out a check to Equity Trust once a month for $540, or quarterly. I don't know which way I did it. I've had people want both. And Cheryl would cut that check, or through Quest, actually through a trust that we set up, and it was very easy. So each of the two joint venture partners share the net rental cash flow of roughly $6,400 a month. Does that make sense? So that's cash flow. That's good cash flow. How about the equity? Now, we sold this house about a year ago, not for the $135 we thought it was worth when we bought it, but for $155. Now, I told you my Section 8 tenant did tear up the house a little bit, so before we put it back to market, we did fix it up, and I don't have visibility to how much we put in, so I'm going to ignore that cost. So these numbers are a little bit inflated, to be honest with you, but you'll get the idea through the case study the same way. We owed $92,500. That was the amount invested from the large IRA sitting at Equity Trust to my $1,000 health savings account that owned the property. We sold it for $155. Again, I'm ignoring commission, I'm ignoring closing costs because it's easier. I'm ignoring my fix-up costs. These numbers are just a little bit inflated. $62,000 of gross equity was created. Now, what happens to the $62,000? We split it 50-50, just like we did the cash flow, okay? So $30,000 for the HSA, $30,000 for the IRA. We close out the joint venture. Now, the entire time, I think it was 4 years, they've been receiving $500 a month for 4 years. And then at the end, they also get the equity piece, both accounts, of 30 grand roughly. So there it is, both partners. The small dollar IRA went from $1,000 to $57,000. Again, the numbers are a little inflated, so I'm being honest with you. And the Roth IRA got the same amount, okay? You see how you went from $1,000 to $50,000 in a small dollar IRA? The Roth received a return on investment of almost 13%. That's a strong number. If you know the rule of 72, you know that doubles every 5.6 years, okay? So you get cash flow, you get equity when the asset is sold, and that's how the joint venture works. Now, the amount invested by the large IRA when the asset is sold, that entire investment goes back to them, and the equity gain is anything above that amount. So your equity partner gets paid back 100%, and then also 50% of the gain. Does that make sense? You see, you can't do a deal like this with a bank. Do you imagine going into the bank saying, I don't care what your interest rate is, I'm going to pay you quarterly, and I don't want a mortgage payment. And by the way, there's no underwriting, no loan application, no rent roll, none of that. You can't do these deals with banks, guys. It's creative deal structuring. I want to talk about risk management real quick. That's why I put this slide on. If you're going to do a joint venture, first of all, if you're the one sourcing the deal, you've got to do the due diligence on the asset. Wendy Sweet really hit that really hard, didn't she? Do the due diligence. And if you're the large dollar IRA, you've got to do due diligence on your joint venture partner. And you've got to make sure that you're insured. Homeowners insurance is critical. You should be named additional insured as a mortgagee, actually, not as additional insured. Mortgagee is actually even better. Both of you should have title insurance. You should talk about how often you're going to make your payment. Talk through some things like, what do we do if we have repairs or vacancy? Now, the net cash flow means if you have vacancy, you don't have a payment due. No rent's due. If you don't collect rent, you don't pay rent to your joint venture partner. In this joint venture I did, we had no vacancy the entire time until the person moved out and we sold it. That isn't always the case. You should also make sure that you understand how you're secured at the courthouse, like through a deed of trust or a mortgage. You guys understand that stuff, right? So make sure you do. So did that explain this graphic pretty well?
Yeah. Can I ask just one question? $92,000 go into your HSA, and you did the repairs.
Okay.
Did the repairs come out of the HSA?
No, the repairs did not come out of the HSA. The HSA only had $1,000.
Well, no. You said when you bought the property, all 92.
No, yeah, we would have to borrow that back from the JV partner as a boost at the end.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or use the cash flow in the HSA and settle up at the end.
Okay.
Because remember, the HSA has been getting $500 a month for 4 years. You guys can do the math on that pretty easy. It's quite a bit of money. It might have been enough, so maybe they didn't need to. I don't remember. Jane, can you come up real quick? And Kevin too, if Kevin's here. Go ahead. Who had a question over here? Nick,
Yeah, so-
you are really thinking this weekend. I love it. You are engaged and locked in.
So I know you said you had 1,000 in your HSA.
Yeah.
So you said you had 1,000 in your HSA, and you had another partner that had, let's say, 91,000.
Yeah.
And you had fix-up costs. So as far as that goes, are you splitting that 50-50 with the?
No, well, in this case, my health savings account had very little money in it. So it didn't have money to do any fix-up. Does that make, I think my mic cut out. Does that make sense? It didn't have any money, so we took it all up front. It took it all up front. Now, I've joint ventured with a number of people in this room, my HSA and my IRA. Jane is one of them. Have you guys met Jane yet? Yeah, wow, you got a following, girl.
A few people.
We've joint ventured together, I don't know how many years, right?
About 5, 6.
Okay, and I've never brought somebody up that I've partnered with ever at a live boot camp. But I did talk to Jane and Kevin about this yesterday. And so we've been through the entire cycle 3 times. How has it been for your IRA? It's been easy, right? All you do, you don't even cash the checks because they go to Quest, right?
Touch 'em.
Go ahead and talk about how it works from your perspective.
Just in a nutshell, I've been self-directing since 2009. We have done some, 3 months in and out, that kind of thing with interest, which is another choice. But about 5, 6 years ago, Jim introduced joint venture. Of course, we read about it, he explained it, we met with him in his office, but I also knew Jim. So I did my due diligence with Jim.
It's an important piece. I'm glad you said that.
Do I do any of the properties, anything to do, I've never been to the properties. I live in Fredericksburg, so but that has nothing to do with it. I knew that he was going to, that's his business. He would buy and he'd do his due diligence, give me the numbers, how much do you have to give me? He would put that with the house. So like he said, we did 3 times. We're actually on a 3rd one.
It's good.
When does he sell? How long does he keep it?
Well, that's
market.
Yeah, and that's a good point. You got to, if you're able to time the market a little bit, that's good. What I've done with Jane is if somebody moves out, then we typically sell it. And they've typically gone probably 2 to 4 years, would you say?
Correct. And the last one was 2 years.
And here's a tip. If you're the large dollar IRA, the shorter the amount of time you own the asset, the higher your ROI is. So I try to respect that because I prefer to hold stuff really long. But I also take the perspective, like if that was my IRA and I was doing the joint venture, shorter and then repeat the same thing again is good. And it's not bad for my small dollar IRA. Do you guys see how over like 6 or 10 years you can go from $1,000 to like 50,000 without making any contributions, or maybe 100? Go ahead.
Given that all the numbers are conditional on the performance of the asset or the house, what expectation do you set with her as to, you know, like you just said, time frame, return, et cetera, given all of those variables? Are you giving any projections or?
No, I don't give any projections. I'm not selling securities either. So I got to be careful about returns and projections. We don't really talk through any of that. You know, like it's like getting a dividend from a stock, but it's a lot higher than what you get with a stock.
This is your return right here. This is the person you're going with. You did your due diligence on your investor, and I would suggest you really, really know how many deals have they done. You're going to go to our RIA meetings, and you're going to have people say, you know, I just learned about self-directed IRAs. Do you have money? But if they've not done any deals, that's not their business. Do not do that. I mean, in a nice way. You want to encourage them, but remember, the legal side of Quest will help you with that. They'll answer all your requests or whoever you go with. But Quest has been a great asset because, boom, they're on the phone. What about this? They cannot tell you what to invest in. They will not tell you, but they will tell you.
Your paperwork will be straight.
Correct. And so again, this is the due diligence right here. This is, like, he's not giving me numbers, but you also have to learn how to run numbers yourself, even if you're not.
I mean, I guess we sort of give rough numbers, like here's the total investment, here's what I think the market rent is, here's what I think the ARV will be today. Hopefully it'll grow over time.
Right, and again, faster sale, like the last one was only 2 years, so it's definitely.
That was a good one, wasn't it? I don't have a case study on that one.
So yes, this is maybe too slow for some people, and I have the benefit of a job, so this isn't, you know, I'm not looking to have this outside an IRA. Of course, everything should be tax-free if you're going to do it, if you can afford to put everything tax-free, but the other thing is that when I look at this with Jim, it's like, wow, you know, I'm just, now how much more do I have? And he'll tell me right away, I'm looking for another house. How much are we going to have 2 weeks from now? So then you roll.
Yeah, that's good, and thank you, Jane. Let me tell you, I really appreciate your doing that. I've never done that with somebody I've joint ventured with before, and I hesitate to do it.
Say it.
All right, thank you. Yes.
And I'm assuming, but I don't want to assume, it can be with more than 2 people, correct? Like, let's say you have
Sure.
an IRA at 30,000, IRA at 100,000, and then.
There's ways to do that, sure. Especially if you learn trust from Walter. There's a lot of easier ways to do that. You could do it in LLC too. Kevin, you and I have joint ventured before. We've known each other a while now, and I was thinking when I drove by the one on North Avenue last week, I think that was a joint venture for a while.
It was.
You want to talk about that experience? Again, Kevin was a joint venture financier. He was the equity financier. Does he look like a financier, like a banker? Yeah. Yeah. We held that for a while, and we sold it. And we had a little vacancy at that one. I had an eviction at that one. I mean, things happened, but overall, it was good.
Back in 2012, when I met Jim down in Texas, I told you that story yesterday. I was introduced to self-directed IRAs back then, and it's a game changer. It really is. And starting out, I didn't know how to use it, and there are a lot of rules that go with self-directed IRAs and prohibited transactions and so forth. And one of the easiest things to do with a self-directed IRA is be a passive investor. And I've teamed up with Jim on a couple of joint ventures over the years, and the one on North Avenue. You know, he's right. I mean, we split the income as it came in. We had an eviction. We had to put somebody else in there. But the return was good. It's a lot better than you can get in the stock market, I can tell you that. And it's consistent. It's not a roller coaster. It's consistent income. And then at the end, if the market's treating you right, when you sell the property, you got that nice little kicker on the back end, and that really, you know.
The kicker is real.
The kicker is real. I mean, it
Equity.
takes that interest rate way up, that yield way up. And, you know, it's a great way to use your IRA and be passive. If you're not active in the business, or if you are, I mean, I'm active in the business now, but I still use my IRA in passive ways because that's the safest way to use it.
Okay, so when do you not want to do a joint venture? As a real estate investor, as an entrepreneur, as a deal maker, here's when. Here's why you don't want to do them. Why I don't want to do them outside of a tax-free environment. Because I'm giving away 50% of the equity. Yeah, that's a lot, guys. Thank you, Kevin. I don't need, like, I can finance other ways when I'm outside of my accounts, but the problem is when I have a small dollar HSA, educational savings account, Roth IRA, inherited IRA, whatever it is, it doesn't have enough to do the investment, and that account can't easily go to a commercial bank and get a non-recourse loan. Because financing in an IRA has got to be non-recourse. I prefer equity financing because it's not subject to unrelated business income tax. So if I could do that, and as part of setting up my kids, my health savings account, my grandkids, stuff like that, I will still do that deal. If it's a small one, I'll go to Detroit and meet up with Tommy and have a good time. Or go see Ray, and I'll do it a couple more in Petersburg. The two I've got in Petersburg are right around the corner from each other. The one is a ranch house. The tenant's been in there forever, and the guy that owned the house died. And so we bought it for $40,000. I've never actually been in the house. My property manager has. They've been there for like 20 years, and I think they'll be there for a long time. The one around the corner was a for sale by owner. It was just a sign in the yard, and we called them. And we got this little 3-bedroom, 1-bath ranch house for like 40 grand. It's rented for $700 a month. So there's different price points that you can do this in. You can do it with super cheap houses. You're going to have higher cash flow, less equity, and that kicker at the end. If you're able to invest a little higher, you could do this with a duplex. You could do it with a quad. You could do it with whatever you want. And as long as you understand the components, how to manage the risk, do the due diligence on the property, do the due diligence on the borrower, like Jane said, it's really important. Any other questions on that? You guys got it? Go ahead.
Going back to your purchase.
Purchase?
We close.
Okay. When we close?
When the money goes to the title company,
Yeah.
then the difference goes to the smaller venture person. The rehab money,
Yeah.
that come out of the HSA, or is that a separate pool of money that comes in to do the rehab?
When the large account wires money to closing, it's the purchase price, closing cost, plus the rehab. Now you've got to figure out how you're going to manage that rehab without taking that money into your personal account, or it'll be a prohibited transaction, right? And there's some different ways to do that. I like to use trusts, okay? And that's the way I've done it. I've been to Walter's events. I've learned to use trusts. I use trusts all the time. If you use trusts, you can handle that transaction a little easier. You can also have Quest cut the checks. They're easier to work with than they used to be as well. So you got to think through that a little bit. There's a couple different ways you can go. Does that make sense? Go ahead, Kevin.
So in your example, the small dollar took title of the property?
Yes.
The large dollar then was in first position?
Yes. So that's a good question. How does the deed and how does the deed of trust, promissory note, mortgage sort of work? Again, I'm using trusts, okay? I love trusts. How many of you guys are already using trusts? They sound complicated, but they're really not. There's just some basic things you've really got to understand really well. And like Mary Hart said, you need to get that trust document absolutely right. Otherwise, it could be sort of the wild, wild west, and you might have some surprises, okay? So I don't want to downplay the complexity of a trust. But that is, so it would, for me, it would be titled to a land trust. And then the beneficiary could be a personal property trust. And then you could stack your trust. There's a lot of different things you can do there. And then the larger dollar IRA could be in a trust, or it could be a Quest account, FBO, for the benefit of. And that will have a mortgage or a deed of trust that has to be secured at the courthouse. Never loan somebody money unsecured. Can you guys repeat that? Never loan somebody unsecured. Otherwise, you don't have access to the capital or the collateral, okay? So you got to be secured at the courthouse. Make sure that mortgage deed of trust is secured. That's your retirement account. I mean, you got to treat it carefully and know what you're doing. And then you'll either get an equity promissory note, or you'll get a joint venture agreement that takes the place of the promissory note. I've done both. I've used a joint venture agreement, and if you guys need one, I'll email it to you. You guys have my email. And I've also done an equity, I've got an equity note and an equity deed of trust, okay, to do the equity financing. It can be done either way. I've done it both ways. I've done it both ways with Jane.
I'm not sure I knew which one it was.
Yeah, now that we've worked together, I think because we understand each other on the same page without the joint venture agreement, I prefer the equity note and the equity deed of trust.
Jim, can I say something?
Yeah.
Part of the closings, you do have to be, like if you're buying property.
Yeah.
You got to be reading the documents and then working with West and you get the money wired. That's probably your biggest job, is to take a look.
Yeah. Yep, but once we're rolling and once I get that property rehabbed and once it's rented, I mean, the money just goes directly to Quest, they cash it, and that's it. It's pretty simple, it's very passive. And then you gotta, so let me give you some tips on being a good borrower, okay? Is that okay? Is that all right? Communicate. Communicate. So Jane and I have worked together a lot of times, so have Kevin and I. But I will still offer communication when we purchase it, maybe some pictures while we go, a text update once in a while. I don't want to smother them with updates, believe me, and they don't either. I got to respect their time. But we do communicate like we're almost done. We're beginning marketing for the tenant. We've got it occupied January 1st. Here's how much the rent is. Here's our first check going out to Quest. These kinds of communication are really important, I think. And like I said, never lend somebody money unsecured, and do your due diligence on that person that's you, the real estate entrepreneur. Make sure they're people of high character. Walter, you talked about like when we were doing the asset management thing, or the protection, how people, loan officers will go onto a golf course and talk about their borrowers and share info. The same thing happens in this room, okay? Because you folks know that when a loan goes bad, people start coming to me. I feel like the loan doctor over the last 24 months. And I've helped people through some really difficult situations over the last 5 years. So people talk not only on a golf course, but at a boot camp as well. So ask for referrals. Make sure the people you're working with are very high character, very high integrity, and you know who they are. You should know who you're working with. You know, when I talked about finding my ideal resident for my rentals, we just rented the one we bought from you, Ben, right on Jeter Street, Avenue, whatever it was. Derek Jeter's my favorite baseball player. I had to buy the house. Anyways, thank you for that. When I started receiving rental applications, we do due diligence deep on these residents. We pull credit. I look through their credit report. I read their credit report. I see what their credit score is. I see where their student loans are and all this info. We contact past landlords. We get copies of their pay stubs so I can verify income. And I check their social media, all this stuff. I think sometimes there can be so much excitement to do a deal that we do less due diligence with people in this same room than I do with my tenants. And that's a dangerous place to go. Okay, that's when you start to get into problems, and you won't say your rent's due, you're going to say your note is due. And what do? Like, then people come to me, and the first time was like 5 years ago. Cheryl and I, it's nobody in this room. Okay, so I can tell this without giving names. There's somebody with a Quest account that loaned money to somebody flipping a house in Richmond, and they had gone past the loan maturity date, which was like 12 months, and they didn't know what to do, and the person went dark. And it was a lot of money. Say it was $200,000 or something. And Cheryl, do you remember this? We went to Jason's Deli with this aging couple, and they were just about in tears. That was their retirement account, and their money. The person went dark, wasn't communicating, and they didn't know what to do. What do? It's heartbreaking for me to see this happen to people. And it was nobody in this room on either side of that transaction. What do? Well, you better get them woken up, right? You better tell them rent's due, or your mortgage is due, or whatever. And if they refuse to, then you got to start foreclosure. And that's why I said don't borrow unsecured, because you can't foreclose if you don't have security. That asset is your security, okay? And don't be afraid to take action soon. And it's so hard just to wait, and they'll say, well, this is coming, this is happening, this is going on, but is it really? And there was somebody that I loaned money to like 6 times, and on the 7th time, he went dark, and he started going through a divorce. And all of a sudden, I was in the same seat as everybody else, and I had to do a deed in lieu of foreclosure to get my property back. And I waited too long, which was maybe 4 months. So take action early. You know, as a landlord, if somebody owes you money, when do you send the pay or quit? Right? Like the 5th or 6th day? Why do we wait months and years as note holders? Don't. Do your due diligence. Know your process if something goes sideways or wrong. And it's okay for a deal to go sideways. Just communicate it. Okay? Communicate is so important. Is that okay to say? Yes. All right.
Hey, Jim, did you get the couple of money back?
Yes.
Awesome. Woo!
More than once in this, and yes, more than once. More than once. Yeah, they are not here. There are others of you in this room that I've helped. And it's gut-wrenching to see. Go ahead, John.
I just want to stress a little bit more also on communicating to your lender or your joint venture partner.
Okay.
That's extremely, extremely important, because, you know, I'm a sample of that. I have an issue with a property that it took me 15 months to get back. And this is a big property, it's $1,400 a month rental on that.
Hang on, John. People can't hear you. Can you catch?
Yeah. I have good hands.
Yeah. You have good feet.
The thing is, I've been hearing a lot of stuff, you know, of people just not respecting the money. We have to respect that. So I just want to add more to what he's saying, that when you are using other people's money, respect it.
Amen. Good.
You have to show that person that, because that person trusted you, you have to respect the money. So that's what my private lender, when I told her what was going on, here's the first thing she told me: don't worry about it.
Communicate. Hey, you know, here's another tip on seller financing. Walter talked a lot about seller financing yesterday. One of the other reasons to always get seller financing when you can is because you can renegotiate later. I wanted to make this point. There's been at least quite a few times that I've gone back and renegotiated with the seller that gave me seller financing. How about, like, if you've got, is there ever an instance when you have a 0% loan that you could go back and renegotiate? Here's one. I've gotten it, 0% interest loans. Like in Petersburg, it's very easy to get 0% interest. Here's how you do it. They want $40,000 for that house. You tell them, I'll give you $30,000 cash, or I'll give you 100 payments of $400 a month. Which do you want? That's 40 or 30, take your pick. That's zero interest, right? People eat that up in Petersburg, because I've done it. So let's say you're working through that 400 payments of zero interest. Why would you ever want to pay it off early? Well, what if you get halfway through and you want to pay them off early? Do you think they would take a discount a second time for an early payoff?
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't want money today rather than waiting? So they'll often take a discount. I also had a commercial building with seller financing on it. It was also in Petersburg on Sycamore Street. And it was a really unique situation. We bought it direct from a doctor. It was a medical office. And after like a year, he donated his note to a church. I was shocked. He donated the entire note. The church came to us and said, we'd like to get paid back. And here is the amount that we're looking to get. And it was a very large discount. Do you think we paid them back?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I've done it, I did it with somebody else sort of during the downturn where we started off at like 7% interest. We went a few years. This is when the economy was rough. We went back to them and we renegotiated for a lower rate and an extended term. So you can't do this stuff with a bank. You can't go to a bank and say, I want to discount my payoff without doing a short sale, right? Or I want to extend my loan, or maybe instead of paying you 5%, I want to start paying you 4%. Or instead of making the first payment in 30 days, I want to start it in 90 days so I have time to renovate and rehab. You can do all that stuff when you're doing creative deal structuring. It's wide open, you got a blank canvas. The only thing standing between you and the deal is your imagination. There's no box at all. So if you can dream up the terms, you can discuss it and you can give them the option. Does that make sense? All right. So I think, Michael, it's time for you if you want to start coming up. All right. Where did my mic go? I'm coming to you. Was that a good session, guys? Was that okay? Okay. Yeah, Michael Zuber is next. I'm excited. We're going to talk about scaling your rentals, now that I've scared everybody.
Are there any differences in structure of the joint venture on new construction?
You can do it any way you want with any asset class you want. It could be done on a mobile home park, new construction. There are so many ways you can do it. You guys met Daniel Clayman. He and I are partners on some different things. He's done joint ventures on new construction where he owns the land, and then he joint ventures with a builder, and then they share the profit at the end. It's all up to your creativity. There are a lot of different ways. Anybody doing subject to deals? The hard part about subject to deals is fix-up costs and payments in arrear. Do you guys agree? What if you joint ventured with my IRA, where I funded you enough to handle the fix-up cost and the arrear cost for half of the equity someday when it's sold, no cash flow? You see what I mean? Is that a good deal for an IRA?
Yes.
Maybe. It probably is. It's a way to leverage a small dollar IRA. Maybe you need $6 grand or 10 grand. You know who I learned that from last week? A friend of mine, Michael Jake. He has an incredible subject to portfolio and is now doing joint ventures out of his IRA, where he's the joint venture partner on that exact scenario. And I thought, you know, Michael Jake's a smart guy. You hang out with smart people, you will get smarter, I promise you. So I picked that one up last week, and it's credit to my friend in Colorado. Okay? Any other questions on joint ventures? Yeah.
So say I came across a subject to situation, want to make an offer on people's houses, give them some creative finance structures.
Okay.
Seller finance subject to, in addition to just a cash payment. Of course, right now, I don't want any rentals at this point in the future. How would I go about, say, assigning or getting my cut for finance?
Oh, you can do assignments on subject to deals, wholesalers. Yeah, I mean, I'll buy that from you, Cole. Bring me some deals. I look forward to working with you, too. You're young. You and I can do deals a long time. All right. Did you have a question or a comment, Dan? Here you go.
This question is just for you, where you're so diversified in the way you finance deals.
Okay.
For me, like for my property management business and my holdings, the income comes in, I have someone that does the books for me, but where you have payments going to so many different sources, I was wondering.
Oh, how do we keep it all straight?
How do you keep all that straight? Because that's like mind.
Yeah, so do you want to take that, Cheryl? Yeah, how do we keep all our payments straight? So Cheryl does all of that for us. The easy ones are bank financing. We do auto pay, so those are easy. The ones with self-directed IRAs, some are monthly, some are quarterly. It gets confusing. I pay, I don't know where Jane went, but we pay her monthly. So we have like Excel schedules, and she follows them and pays them. But the quarterly ones are a little more difficult. My houses in Petersburg are all quarterly. My houses in Richmond are monthly. But yeah, you've got to have good organization, and everything in real estate that we do is a process and a system. Let me know when you're ready.
Anybody know how to get this up here?
Yeah. It's right here. Any other questions?